All right, welcome back to another episode of How to Invest in Commercial Real Estate. And we are here today with another cool topic. But before we begin, we're just going to talk about a little bit about what's going on. And we're closing out the year strong. We're pushing through the end of the year with 2 last-minute closings. One gym deal we just closed, and we're going to launch that out to investors here pretty soon. But more importantly, one that just launched is the Criterion Retail Partner deal. It's a retail development in Owasso, hard corner of Owasso. We're developing just over an acre of land.
How hard is the corner, Braden? Super hard?
Hardest corner in Tulsa.
Okay. Well, it's in Owasso, but whatever.
That's why I said Tulsa.
Okay.
Anyway.
So is it up on the website? Can people see it?
It is up on the website. It launched already, so it might be full already. Not sure. But it was a $1.2 million equity raise, plus or minus a 20% IRR, depending on when we exit the deal. We typically always give a best case scenario, a most likely, and a worst case scenario. And those are just based on exit cap rates on our NOI, right? So around 20% IRR. We'll be in and out in 18 months. We have to deliver a couple pads, wait for them to build the building, and then we list it for sale. So super exciting opportunity. And it's right next to a Chipotle. So it's got to be some good real estate.
And how close is it to our other development deal there?
On the other side of Chipotle is the last retail development we did.
Sweet. All right.
So great real estate. Anyway, so much of this show, I think we talk about reasons to get involved in real estate.
Reasons to buy, why we buy.
All of those things. But there's a lot of reasons not to buy real estate. There's a million reasons not to buy real estate. And sometimes you get into a deal and things just aren't what you thought they were. They aren't necessarily what was pitched. There's hiccups along the road. I mean, in the first 30 days of every contract, we have a free inspection period. And that allows us to test the rent they're bringing in, the NOI, to make sure that number matches up. We're inspecting the property. We're making sure the tenants are open and for business. And more often than not, there's a hiccup you have to work through. And they're not always reasons to walk away from a deal. But today we're just going to go through some of the hiccups and scenarios we've encountered the most. Sometimes we've walked away from the deal. Sometimes we were able to negotiate something and stay in it. But we're just going to go through a list of things that you may need to raise a red flag for, things that may raise a red flag and you may want to walk away from.
Yeah.
All right. What's the first one, Brian?
Okay, so our first deal, we were under contract in our due diligence period in Wichita, on a deal in Wichita, right? And so we thought it looked like a great deal. We drove up there to inspect it, and the property wasn't in great condition. It's okay. We probably could have done some things to fix it up. But the main thing was we started looking in some of those spots, and nobody was in there, right? And when we started looking at the leases, the previous owner had given free lease for about 6 months to a bunch of people. And to us, it looked like no one was in there. No one planned on moving in. And at the end of their free lease period, they were just going to give up the spot.
It was odd that we were walking around and these units were supposed to be leased and it would have a business name, and then the space would look just like it's been vacant for 3 years.
Yeah.
And so we got the opinion or the impression that he was out there and had maybe convinced some tenants to sign their name on a lease with free rent indefinitely, just to show that it was occupied, to try to get a sale. And then after that free rent period, of course, they can just decide whether 6 months from now they want to move in. Well, that had a lot of risk for us. And so we ended up bailing on that deal.
Yeah, I think we probably went back and offered a lower price based on the fact that
millions lower.
Yeah, it was millions lower, and it fell through. I'm glad it did.
The interesting thing about that is, right, we all have our own perspectives in real estate. That was one point you guys brought up, but one of the big points that stood out to me on that deal was the massive money pit of the center. It was hundreds of thousands of feet. The parking lot was garbage. The roofs were garbage. Some of the spaces looked like they hadn't been built out in decades. There was like an 18,000 square foot laser tag facility that looked like a laser. I mean, it still looked like a laser tag facility, but it was vacant. Yeah. So I just saw millions of dollars, even if all the tenants stayed. Who's fixing all of this stuff? And I didn't see the rent supporting all of the CapEx it needed. So obviously walked away from that deal.
Yeah, site visit did it. So on the numbers looked okay. We had a good debt quote, but when we showed up and actually inspected the deal, the walkthrough is what cost us the deal.
And I guarantee you there's one person out there listening who, we talk about walking every single apartment unit or walking the retail units, they probably think we're crazy. But we actually walk the units, and this is why. And this is why we backed out. And if we hadn't have gone there and we would have bought off the OM, we would have been screwed.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, what's next?
Okay, we had another deal here in Tulsa, and we couldn't get the owner to give us historical financial data, right?
Yeah, that was an interesting one. It was a good location, good center, but we were trying to verify the income, and he would not give us anything but the current rent roll and like the last 6 months financials, and it just gave me pause. Now, I'm not saying it wasn't a good center, but for me, if I can't get the actual income and expenses for the last 2 or 3 years, even if they're not necessarily what the owner wants them to be, if he's not willing to turn them over, then I'm going to approach that with caution. And in this case, it caused me to walk from the deal.
Yeah. We have that in our PSA, our purchase and sale agreement, standard language that we ask for. It'd be weird if somebody tried to strike that in a contract. And most importantly, this is a big thing for the lender. The lender is lending 75, 80% of the capital to buy the building, and they want those financials just as bad, if not more than us, to make sure they can cover the debt. That's one that I would put serious consideration in.
Right.
Okay.
The next one is, I haven't had to back off on one like this. Joel, you've probably run into this some, but really bad environmental issues that you find out about in the due diligence period.
Yeah, I mean, that is one that doesn't seem like a big deal. You're like, the phase 1 recommended a phase 2. What does that mean? It means that you could have a potentially huge liability on your hands. Now, it could be that there's nothing there, but that's why they recommend the phase 2. It's kind of a more extensive study. And one example I'll give you is a deal out in Vegas where we had a phase 2 recommended, and I had the broker, I'll just skip ahead and say, okay, I did the phase 2. The phase 2 recommended some remediation. Hey, you dig some wells, and there might be stuff down here. And the broker was like, this is a bunch of bullshit. They're not gonna find anything. They never find anything. This is just them covering their ass.
Sounds like a broker.
Yeah. And I was like, I'm not just gonna take your word for it. So we hired an environmental attorney, and he helped us negotiate a huge amount of money set aside, and the seller had to be responsible for any remediation found by that phase 2. We went ahead and closed. The good news is that we got the seller to pay for that, so they've been paying for that now for 3 or 4 years.
Well, let's pause there. I think one of the biggest key indicators for me is that you ran into this problem and you found an environmental attorney, and that environmental attorney sounds like they more than covered their fee. Seems like they negotiated you a massive win. So when you come into something like this, reach out to an expert.
Yeah, for sure. And what could have been a disaster is if we had just gone ahead and closed, or thought it wasn't a big deal, and just said, hey, give us $100,000, but then we would have had to been responsible. We're still monitoring wells 3 to 4 years later on that property, and they are still finding contaminants. And so I don't know exactly when this is even going to be cleared up. Luckily, the seller is still paying for it. But I hope that we get out of this deal with that being taken care of by the seller. But just know environmental issues are not something to mess around with. And if you have one that have recommended a phase 2, do the phase 2 before you buy it. If the phase 2 has any recommendations, don't buy it until you get a professional attorney involved.
Just as a side note, how long does it take to get a phase 2? Are you going to be able to get that done within a 30-day due diligence period, or are you going to have to delay?
That's a great question.
It is a good question. I don't know that I can answer it. You might be able to get it done, but if you can't, because let's say people in the area are busy, or you're getting a 3 or 4 or 5 week lead time, get an extension. If the seller won't give you an extension for that phase 2 and you can't get it done in time, walk away.
Yeah. Okay. All right. The next one is that we looked at is if you get to your earnest money, hard money time, and you don't have a term sheet yet on a loan or loan tied up.
So I think more importantly, a commitment letter, right? You're going to have tons of term sheets because you're a smart investor and good steward of your money. So you're getting multiple offers. It's like buying a car, like anything. So you're going to have multiple term sheet, but more importantly, you need to have a signed commitment letter before your earnest money goes hard, because once your earnest money goes hard, you lose a big piece of leverage. You lose, whatever your earnest money may be. I would say our average earnest money amounts $50,000 at least. Roundabout. Sometimes it's a lot more. Sometimes it's less. So
what does it mean and I'm going to explain this. What does it mean to lose your leverage? If you go past your due diligence and you don't have a commitment letter, now all it takes is for someone in that bank's credit department to say, we're not going to do it. It doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to get debt, but if you can't get debt by the closing date,
Right.
The seller can just say, you know what? I'm just going to keep your $100,000 earnest money. And you may say, well, I still want to buy it. And I got a lender that can do it. I just need another 3 weeks. He's going to be like, great, I'm going to take your $100,000 and you can pay me the purchase price in another 3 weeks.
Yeah.
You just lose your ability to negotiate it all with the seller once your earnest money is hard. Yeah. So if you do not have a commitment from a bank, you have to get an extension. If you're not able to get an extension, you should most likely walk away.
Okay.
So I think this is an important point. Let's dive more into what a commitment letter from a bank is. How would you define a commitment letter, Joel?
It would be a commitment by the bank to lend on this property based on the terms outlined in that letter.
Can it be an email that says they will, or you need a signed letter, or?
I would want it something that says, addressed on bank letterhead, saying that this is it can even be a conditional loan commitment, but it needs to say loan commitment.
Yeah.
And then it'll have these deals in it. It may say that, we don't find anything, nefarious at the property that we haven't been told. It may be based on 80% of the appraisal, whatever that is. So you may still have some risk moving ahead after receiving the commitment letter, but it's going to be pretty minimal, and it's going to outline those risks. And then you can decide, are these risks okay for me to take?
Yeah, I think the key difference point between a term sheet and a commitment letter is a term sheet is saying, hey, we could lend these terms based on the underwriting of the property and the underwriting of your personal credit, which is an unlimited amount of questions from a bank, an unlimited amount. And then a commitment letter is saying, we've reviewed the underwriting for the property and you personally, and we will issue this loan if all of these conditions on the term sheet are met. And that may be an appraisal, that may be a number of things, right? But you need that commitment letter, because then that puts leverage back in your hands, because the lender can't walk away from a commitment letter scotch-free. They open themselves up to litigation if they're issuing commitment letters and they're not honoring them, and the buyers are taking real damages because they're losing their $100,000 earnest money. So they know the impact of a commitment letter, and you need to have that commitment letter before the end of your due diligence period. And if you don't have it, don't be afraid to extend your due diligence period.
Right. All right. Next one is, okay, let's say you find some problems with the property, whatever it might be, roof or whatever, and that wasn't disclosed in the OM. You made your offer based on the information in the OM, and then the seller won't negotiate with you on those problems. We've run into that before. I mean, I guess you need to decide whether you're going to do it or not. But
yeah, then it becomes a tough decision. But that may be a time to walk away, because if, let's say, your equity raise on a $4 million deal is $1 million, and then you find $700,000 worth of CapEx that's going to be needed in the first year or two.
Yeah,
that's great.
My wedding ring just ran away from me. So that may blow your cash on cash returns out of the water. It may reduce them so much that it's not even the same deal. And so if the seller's like, nope, take it or leave it, well, then you may have to leave it and let him deal with that issue with the next buyer, because he's not going to get out of addressing that. Every buyer, if they're legitimate, are going to go through those same exercises and find out the roof needs replaced or the parking lot needs repairs. And so I would roll the dice and take my chances that he isn't going to find somebody else, and he may even come back to you.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah,
I mean, every single time. It's your job as a buyer to find problems with this. And I know you love it and you want to buy it and it's going to make you all this money. But for the first 30 days, you need to poke as many holes in it as you can, because you're testing it and you're spending millions of dollars. So you want to know every possible thing that could go wrong and budget accordingly, right? So the roof is a big one. A roof could be $10 a square foot. If you're buying a 40,000 square foot center, that's almost $500,000 in roof exposure. If the roof needs replaced in a few years and your down payment's $1 million, you just cut your returns substantially by having to replace that roof. If the sellers owned the property for the majority of the usable life, let's just say he put the roof on, the roof lasts 20 years and he's selling it in year 19. How do you not have a reasonable, logical case to take to the seller and say, hey, you used 19 of the 20 years of the usable life of this. How can you not credit me for a new roof? And to Joel's point, the next guy is going to find it. The next buyer is going to find it. At what point are you going to credit for this? It's only going to be a matter of time. Your price could be dropping the entire time. Interest rates could be rising the entire time. The timing of this stuff is just as important.
Right.
Yeah, and if you haven't underwritten that, you're just putting yourself at an unnecessary risk. Yeah. So I think let's just decide to move on if the seller isn't going to compensate in some way.
Right. And again, just to clarify, all of these points are done within your inspection period because that's your free window to walk. Right. We may have a specific clause in the contract that says if we can't get a clean phase one, then we get our earnest money back. But that may be, one of the only exceptions that's not under the general inspection cancellation clause or whatever we want to call it.
Right. Okay. Next one. I'd be interested to hear what you guys would do in this case. If you can't get an estoppel on, let's say, your largest income producing tenant, what your reaction would be. Maybe tell us what an estoppel does exactly and why that's a problem.
Yeah. So I can talk about the estoppel. And then
go ahead, start us off and then I'll comment.
Do it.
So an estoppel is the tenant and the new landlord, or it's a tenant filled out form, and it is the tenant re-ratifying the lease. They're confirming all the major points. When did rent start? When does your lease expire? Do you have any rent increases? Maybe this form is created by your attorney or the broker. You can add or edit to this form. It's not like a one size fits all. It verifies the security deposit they have on file. It says their rent is paid up to date. It says they're not in default. It says they have no intention of being in default. They're not under bankruptcy. It just ratifies, hey, I'm a tenant in this building. I pay this amount of rent and I'm not planning on closing. And we need that. Why? Because it's a security deal. You're buying all these leases. You want to make sure those leases are real people. And a letter saying, yeah, I paid rent this month and I plan on paying rent next month brings me a lot of comfort.
Yeah. And if you can't get that, then that's a big red flag. Is that right?
It can be a red flag. Sometimes it's hard, especially with large tenants or national tenants, to get the right person that's willing to sign off on it. And it can take time, and you may not have enough time. And so the alternative there is to walk, because you can't verify the validity of the lease or what's owed. Or I've had sellers say, hey, I'll sign it. I'll sign an estoppel. Basically, I'll put my name on it, guaranteeing that they don't, they're not owed any free rent that we don't know about, that they're current with their rent. And so at least you have a document signed by the seller to at least go back to them and sue them if things aren't quite right. But if you can't get the estoppel from the tenant and the seller isn't willing to guarantee the estoppel, now you have a red flag that may be worth walking away from. And just another point on estoppels, because there's been properties early on that I did not get them and some problems arose, is what you're trying to avoid is after the fact, a tenant has a signed document by the seller that's a side agreement that says, well, he says here, I don't have to pay the first month's rent in 2025. And
this person's obviously country.
Yeah, they're country.
Yeah.
And so you're looking at this and you're like, okay, the seller didn't tell me about that. But if I don't have something in the contract that specifically obligates them to disclose or to, tell me about that stuff, then that can be out there. But what gets rid of it is the estoppel. The estoppel will say, hey, there's no outstanding rent owed. There's no outstanding free rent or other perks promised. And so when you get the tenant to sign that, then it doesn't matter what other agreement he has, because you have that estoppel that said there's nothing out there. And so then that gives you something to battle against whatever other document the tenant has.
Right.
So that's the important part about the estoppel.
Okay, that kind of ties in.
You're still stuck on the accent?
I'm still stuck in the accent.
It was an Atwoods, apparently.
Yeah.
It was or a tractor. What is it? Tractor Supply, maybe.
Yeah, maybe a tractor supply.
So that ties into the last point.
I think everybody in New York thinks we have those kind of accents here. I think California, they're like, he's just doing an Oklahoma accent.
Might as well play him up.
We don't have sushi here. We ride a horse.
No, they need to watch Tulsa King, see how big we are.
I don't know if that helps.
I watched episode 2. It was really pretty slow and
Howdy.
pandering a little bit, but
anyway, last point.
Okay, that does tie into the last point. What other information might you find out about one of your largest income producers, tenants, that would keep you from closing on the deal?
Bankruptcy, Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It really bites you in the ass.
Maybe even a rumor of bankruptcy, possibly.
A rumor of bankruptcy can cost you your earnest money, as I know all too well. Yeah. We were in a deal, and I allowed myself to go non-refundable. And then that day or the day after, a story came out about the potential of one of the tenants to file bankruptcy. Just the rumor of it.
Yeah.
Bank canceled the contract. I didn't have the right clauses in my contract. lost my earnest money. It was very, very painful.
Yeah.
But I would say when you have a big tenant, we're not in the business of taking huge risks. I know people think that we do because we're commercial real estate investors.
I can't believe you said that.
But we don't. We try not to take huge risk. And the bigger you have, the one tenant is of your center, and the less sure you are of their business operations or how long they're going to be there, the more risk there is. And so, I would be very careful if you have a tenant that's over 50% of your income and they have 2 years left on the lease and you don't have confirmation that they're renewing. That's a big risk. And that might be one that you want to walk away from. Yeah. So keep that in mind.
Yeah. I mean, you can find out a million bad things about a big tenant or even a small tenant. I mean, even your local credit mom and pop stores, there was a story about us, it was a small deal. It was like 20,000 feet. This tenant was maybe 4,000 or 5,000 feet. So not a massive tenant in proportion to the center or at all. And we were walking through a shop and it was just empty. It
was a liquor store and it was relatively empty. It wasn't empty, but it just didn't have a feel of a thriving liquor store. And he had been late on his payment the month we were purchasing the property. So the red flag went up and we're like, okay, we still like this center. Let's go talk to this guy and just see. He's late on his rent. The store was a little light. What's he have to say?
Guess whose store closed down within immediately after
first
closing.
The meeting was, I love this store. This is all I ever want to do. I'm never closing this liquor store. This is what I'm going to do for. And my dad has tons of money and he's got me set up and this is going nowhere. And as soon as we closed, he never made a rent payment, never opened for business, closed down, totally lied to us.
Yeah.
And so, but overall, what we did is because of our uncertainty, we negotiated a full year's rent up front from the seller. And so for that year that he was out, we were getting rent and we could reposition the space and we ended up releasing it to another tenant.
Yeah. Okay.
So let's end on that because I think that's the theme here, right? It's your job in the first 30 days, once you get a property in contract, to go and find all the things wrong with it. But that gives you an opportunity as the buyer. And that opportunity is the ability to renegotiate with the seller. And hopefully the seller is willing to renegotiate based on what you found. And the best way to do that is with a logical explanation that they can reasonably understand and then be willing to walk away from it if they don't accept it. Because at the end of the day, if you have to put a new $500,000 roof on the property and the seller's not willing to pay for it or whatever, going back to that example, it just doesn't make sense. So stop wasting your time on things that don't make sense and propose things that do make sense. Anyway, we will catch you next week on how to invest in commercial real estate. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.